And during that time, I consider the years I spent on I Love Lucy to be perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career.
For decades, audiences adored Vivian Vance as the witty, sharp-tongued Ethel Mertz. But behind the laughter and the glamorous lights of I Love Lucy was a story few ever heard. What the public saw was comedy perfection, yet what Vivian lived was far more complicated. She carried secrets about her career, her health, and even her friendship with Lucille Ball that would only come to light years later. To the world, she was just the sidekick, but in reality, she was fighting battles that shaped her legacy in ways most fans never imagined. What Vivian finally revealed about the show and her life will change the way you see television's most beloved sitcom forever. Long before I Love Lucy became the television phenomenon that would cement her name in pop culture, Vivian Vance was already living a very different kind of stardom. Born Vivian Roberta Jones in Cherryvale, Kansas, in 1909, she was the second of 6 children in a strict household that did not encourage dreams of the stage. Her father was a storekeeper who believed acting was sinful, and her mother kept the family deeply rooted in traditional values. For a young Vivian, that meant every aspiration she nurtured for the theater had to be carried in secret. She once admitted that as a teenager, she would sneak away to watch plays and hide magazines filled with stories about Broadway performers, knowing her parents would never approve. This tension at home planted the earliest seeds of her resilience, a resilience that would carry her through the harshest periods of her career. When she was old enough, Vivian left Kansas behind and set her sights on the stage. She studied drama in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where she first began using the name Vance. Those who saw her early performances recalled a young woman who had an uncanny ability to flip between comedy and tragedy with ease, a skill that would later become her greatest weapon as an actress. By the late 1930s, she was working steadily in New York, a city where countless hopefuls tried and failed to make a name for themselves. But Vivian had something different: discipline, training under acclaimed mentors like Eva Le Gallienne, and a willingness to reinvent herself when the competition was overwhelming. Her work paid off. On Broadway, she was not a mere supporting face in the chorus line. She was front and center, taking leading roles in productions such as Music in the Air and Let's Face It. She could sing with clarity, dance with style, and deliver lines with sharp timing that critics noted in glowing reviews. This was a woman who belonged in the spotlight, and her peers recognized her as one of the most versatile performers of her generation. In fact, had television never called her name, she might have continued her career in theater as a respected star, without ever stepping into the role that would change everything. But destiny had other plans. By the early 1950s, Hollywood was beginning to feel the ripple effect of television. Studios, once dismissive of the small screen, were now rushing to secure talent who could keep viewers glued to their living rooms. For Vivian, this meant a new opportunity was about to open, but it came with a twist. When producers sought her out for a comedy pilot starring Lucille Ball, she was 39 years old, with the poise of a seasoned actress, but none of the star power that Ball commanded. To some, casting her as Lucy Ricardo's best friend seemed like a step down for a Broadway actress of her caliber. Yet to Vivian, it was a chance to reach a national audience, even if it meant trading glamour for the less flattering image of Ethel Mertz. What she could not have predicted at the time was how profoundly this decision would shape her life. For millions of viewers, the name Vivian Vance would become inseparable from Ethel. For critics, it was as though her Broadway career had been erased in an instant. And for Vivian herself, the leap from promising stage star to comedic sidekick was both a blessing and a cage. She had worked her whole life to escape the confines of her strict upbringing, only to find herself stepping into a new kind of confinement, the television character that would follow her forever. And as America fell in love with Lucy and Ethel's friendship on screen, behind the curtain, Vivian was beginning to face the complicated reality of what it meant to be cast not as the star, but as the eternal second banana When I Love Lucy debuted in 1951, the show quickly became a cultural earthquake. Overnight, Lucille Ball was no longer just a comedic actress. She was the queen of television. For Vivian Vance, who stepped into the role of Ethel Mertz, the experience was both exhilarating and unsettling. On screen, Ethel was the perfect foil to Lucy Ricardo, the no-nonsense voice of reason who got dragged into Lucy's harebrained schemes. The chemistry was undeniable, and audiences adored their partnership. But behind the laughter, the reality of life on the set was far more complicated than most fans ever imagined. From the very beginning, Desi Arnaz, who not only starred in the show but also produced it, was firm about the casting. He wanted Lucy and Ricky Ricardo to look like the glamorous young couple in their prime, and Ethel and Fred Mertz to appear as the older, less glamorous neighbors. For Vivian, who was nearly the same age as Lucille Ball, and still very much a striking woman, this meant being deliberately styled to look frumpy. She was fitted with dowdy costumes, padded in ways that disguised her figure, and her makeup was intentionally less flattering. In other words, the show demanded that she bury her own star quality in order to shine a light on Lucy's antics. It was a sacrifice few actors would accept, but Vivian recognized the opportunity, even if it meant her true self was hidden in plain sight. Still, she was not entirely silent about the imbalance. It is well documented that Vivian objected strongly when producers wanted her to play Ethel as overweight and unattractive, a caricature rather than a person. She had fought too hard to be taken seriously as an actress, to now be reduced to a punchline. After negotiations, and no small amount of tension, she struck a compromise. Ethel would remain Lucy's partner in mischief, but Vivian refused to let her character become cruelly mocked for her appearance. This insistence not only protected her dignity, but also gave Ethel a richness that elevated the comedy. Her relationship with William Frawley, who played her on-screen husband Fred Mertz, was another layer of reality few fans knew about. While the two were hilarious together on screen, off-screen they had a famously strained relationship. Frawley was decades older, a man with a reputation for heavy drinking, and Vivian reportedly found him crude and difficult. She is even said to have joked that she would only play his wife on television if she never had to kiss him. The irony was that their prickly off-screen dynamic added a certain edge to their performances, making the Mertz marriage feel authentic in its own flawed way. In contrast, Vivian's bond with Lucille Ball was far different. The two women formed a genuine friendship rooted in respect and admiration. Lucy knew that Vivian was more than a sidekick. She was the anchor that made Lucy's schemes believable, and the safety net that made the comedy soar. Over the years, Ball would come to rely on Vance not just as a co-star, but as a confidant. Still, that closeness came with its own pressures. Vivian often had to navigate the delicate balance of supporting Lucy's brilliance while ensuring her own work was not overshadowed. It was a dance of egos and timing, and few realized how much thought went into keeping that balance alive. The reality of the I Love Lucy set was a mixture of laughter, tension, and constant reinvention. Every week brought new scripts, new challenges, and the relentless pace of live taping. Vivian Vance had to be sharp, quick, and willing to let her talent disappear into the background so that Lucy's chaos could sparkle. To audiences, she was simply the dependable neighbor with a biting comeback. To those who knew her, she was a professional making constant sacrifices to keep the illusion alive. But as the seasons went on, and as the show's success reached unimaginable heights, the sacrifices began to weigh heavier on her. Fame was supposed to bring freedom and opportunity. Yet for Vivian, it also carried a shadow, the fear of being trapped forever in the role of Ethel Mertz. And that fear would soon shape her choices in ways fans never saw coming. As I Love Lucy grew into a television juggernaut, it gave Vivian Vance something every actor dreams of: recognition. Practically overnight, she became a household name. But recognition can be a double-edged sword. And for Vivian, The success of Ethel Mertz came with chains she could never quite shake off. What seemed like the role of a lifetime was also the beginning of a trap, one that would follow her long after the cameras stopped rolling. Ethel Mertz was designed as the ordinary neighbor, the steady counterpoint to Lucy's chaos. She was not glamorous, not stylish, not young and adventurous. She was grounded, practical, and, in many episodes, the butt of the joke. And while that made for brilliant comedy, it created a perception that Vivian Vance herself was frumpy and older than her years. Viewers could not separate the actress from the character. Even casting agents in Hollywood began to see her only through the lens of Ethel. This was a painful irony. In her real life, Vivian was glamorous, witty, and still in her 40s when the show began. She loved fashion, carried herself with elegance, and was nothing like the plain housewife audiences saw every Monday night. But the typecasting was brutal. The entertainment industry, then even more rigid than it is today, struggled to see her outside of the shadow of Lucy's sidekick. Offers for fresh roles were scarce, and when they did come, they often demanded the same formula: dowdy costumes, nagging dialogue, and supporting positions where she was expected to play second fiddle. Vivian's frustration grew. She had trained for years to master dramatic roles, had performed on Broadway as a leading lady, and yet millions only saw her as Ethel. Even when she landed work outside I Love Lucy, such as in guest appearances on television or in theater revivals, the press rarely highlighted her actual performance. Instead, headlines reminded audiences that Ethel was back, no matter what role she played. It was as though the character had swallowed the actress whole. And the situation was not just professional, it affected her personally, too. Friends recalled that Vivian often wrestled with her self-image, especially when strangers in public treated her as though she truly were the frumpy, middle-aged neighbor from television. While Lucille Ball was celebrated as a red-headed beauty and pioneer, Vivian was pigeonholed into the role of comic relief, an image that chipped away at her confidence over the years. Yet despite the typecasting, she never let her professionalism slip. Week after week, she delivered sharp performances that elevated the show. If Lucy Ricardo was the dreamer, Ethel Mertz was the grounding force. And many historians argue that without Vivian's timing, the series would never have worked as well as it did. Lucille Ball herself recognized this truth, once admitting that she could never have pulled off her most daring comedic moments without Vivian there to steady the rhythm of the scene. Still, for Vivian, the question lingered. Was she destined to be remembered only as someone else's sidekick? This internal conflict would haunt her for years. It shaped the way she approached new opportunities, the way she viewed her own success, and ultimately, the way she revealed the truths about her time on I Love Lucy. Because behind the laughter, she was quietly carrying the weight of an identity she never fully chose. And that struggle was only just beginning to surface. While the world laughed along with Ethel Mertz, Vivian Vance was silently enduring battles that audiences never suspected. Fame had given her a platform and financial stability, but it did not shield her from the very human struggles of illness, heartbreak, and private despair. If anything, the pressure of being in the public eye only made those struggles more difficult to bear. Even during the run of I Love Lucy, Vivian's health was often fragile. The grueling production schedule demanded endless rehearsals, long filming days, and constant travel for promotional appearances. For someone with underlying issues of anxiety and exhaustion, it was punishing. She dealt with recurring bouts of depression, something rarely discussed openly in the 1950s. Friends later recalled that behind her sharp wit and warm smile was a woman who often doubted herself, worried she would never be seen as more than Ethel, and quietly fought to keep her spirits intact. As the years went on, her physical health became just as challenging. She endured multiple surgeries and periods of poor health that forced her to step away from work at times. By the late 1960s, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, a battle she kept largely private. In an era when talking about such illnesses was still taboo, Vivian carried the burden quietly, determined not to let it overshadow her public image. The treatment left her weakened, but she returned to work as often as she could, refusing to let illness define her. Compounding her health struggles was the turmoil in her personal life. Vivian had been married multiple times, and her relationships were often marked by disappointment and strain. Her marriages ended in divorce more than once, and she sometimes confided to close friends that she felt unlucky in love. The contrast between Lucy Ricardo's perfect sitcom marriage and Vivian's real-life heartbreaks was striking, and it added to the emotional weight she carried behind the scenes. Yet, through all of this, Vivian refused to let the public see her pain. On set, she was known for her professionalism, her sharp comedic timing, and her loyalty to Lucille Ball. She never allowed her struggles to compromise the performances that millions tuned in to watch. To viewers, she was the dependable neighbor, always ready with a sarcastic remark or a knowing glance. To those closest to her, she was a woman quietly enduring a storm. It was this combination of personal resilience and hidden suffering that gave her performances such authenticity. When Ethel rolled her eyes at Lucy's antics or delivered a weary punchline, audiences saw humor. But for Vivian, some of that humor came from a place of truth, an ability to channel her own struggles into a role that demanded both warmth and exasperation. And though she rarely spoke about these battles while the cameras were rolling, years later, she would reveal just how much she had endured in silence. Those revelations painted a very different picture of the woman America thought it knew, and they made clear that behind the laughter, Vivian's life was far more complicated than any script could capture. As with many Hollywood legends, time has blurred the line between fact and fiction when it comes to Vivian Vance. One of the most enduring myths is that she and Lucille Ball were sworn enemies behind the scenes. While their relationship was never as effortless as Lucy and Ethel's on-screen friendship, it was not defined solely by rivalry. Yes, there were creative disagreements and moments of tension, especially around Vivian's frustrations with being typecast, but there is also documented evidence of warmth and loyalty. In later years, Lucy openly credited Vivian as indispensable to the show's success, and she supported her co-star through illness, which hardly fits the feud narrative fans often repeat. Another misconception is that Vance loathed the character of Ethel Mertz. While she did resent being portrayed as dowdy, especially opposite William Frawley, her much older on-screen husband, she also recognized how vital Ethel was to the show's balance. Without her sharp timing and grounded humor, Lucy's wild antics wouldn't have landed nearly as well. Far from hating the role, Vivian wrestled with the contradiction of being grateful for it while also feeling trapped by its limitations. There's also the myth that I Love Lucy was the pinnacle and end of her career. In truth, Vance went on to earn acclaim in stage productions and returned to television multiple times, even reprising Ethel in later Lucy projects. Her career was not a single highlight, but a body of work that proved her versatility. By untangling these myths, Vivian Vance's legacy comes into sharper focus, not as a bitter sidekick overshadowed by Lucy, but as a pioneering actress who navigated the complexities of fame, friendship, and personal identity in a way that still resonates today. Vivian Vance's journey resonates deeply with the conversations happening in entertainment today. Her struggles with typecasting, image control, and unequal treatment echo the same challenges many actresses still face. She was expected to play a sidekick, to dull her shine so the star could stand out, and to accept being paired with an older man for comedic effect. Standards that reflected not just the era, but a wider pattern of how women in Hollywood were framed. Her honesty about these frustrations was ahead of its time, and it highlights the importance of giving actresses creative respect and the freedom to define their own identities. In a world where conversations about representation, fairness, and the pressure of public image continue to dominate headlines, Vivian's story feels as relevant as ever. She wasn't just Lucy's friend, she was a trailblazer who challenged the industry, even if quietly, and left a blueprint for others to follow. Vivian Vance's life was far more complex than the myths suggest. She wasn't trapped in lifelong feuds, nor was she simply the dowdy neighbor who existed in Lucy's shadow. She was a talented actress who navigated fame, insecurities, and the harsh realities of Hollywood with resilience. By separating rumor from fact, we uncover a story of respect, courage, and enduring influence. Her legacy reminds us that what we see on screen rarely tells the whole truth, and that behind every great performance lies a human story worth remembering. So, what do you think? Was Vivian Vance unfairly boxed in by the industry? Or did she find strength in redefining herself despite the odds? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into classic Hollywood history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next story.